When I woke up that morning, something felt off. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't just mean peace, it means loss. I walked through the hallway, my heart beating faster with every step. The family photos were gone from the walls, the furniture empty. Even the old rocking chair where I used to read stories to my son, gone. And then, on the kitchen counter, I saw it. A piece of paper, a legal document. My name was printed at the top, followed by one sentence that made my knees weaken. Property ownership has been transferred. I froze. My eyes darted to the bottom, and there it was. My son's signature. He had sold the house while I was sleeping. Before we continue, tell me the time and which country you're watching from. I'd love to know where my listeners are joining me from. I couldn't breathe. My mind went blank. All I could think about was why. Why would my own son, the boy I gave everything to, do this to me? My hands trembled as I clutched the paper, memories flooding my mind like a storm. It all started years ago, when it was just the two of us, me and Ethan. His father had left when he was barely 5. I was only 26 then, working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I didn't have much, but I had my boy, and that was enough. I remember the nights I came home exhausted, my feet aching from standing at the diner all day, only to find Ethan asleep on the couch, waiting for me with his little school books open. Sometimes I'd wake him gently and he'd mumble, "Mom, did we make enough for dinner tonight?" Even back then, he worried about me. That was the kind of heart Ethan had, soft, kind, and full of love. I worked hard for him. I missed birthdays, skipped meals, and took double shifts. Every dollar I earned, I saved for his future. I wanted him to have the life I never had: college, comfort, peace. When Ethan got into college, I cried for hours, tears of pride. I sold my wedding ring and used the money to help pay for his tuition. He promised he'd make me proud. And he did, for a while. After graduation, Ethan came back home different. The boy who used to hug me and ask how my day went now walked around with his phone glued to his hand and a tone I'd never heard before: cold, distant, impatient. He started talking about money a lot. How we could make more if we sold this place. How living in the suburbs was a waste. How houses like ours were being bought for triple the price. At first, I thought he was just dreaming big. I encouraged him, I always did. But slowly, I began to feel like he was no longer dreaming with me, but against me. One evening, I was cooking his favorite beef stew when he came home with a real estate agent. I was shocked. "Ethan, what's going on?" I asked. "Just showing her around," he said casually, opening doors, pointing at walls. "You know, in case we ever want to sell." I froze. "We?" The agent smiled politely, clearly uncomfortable as she noticed the tension. "This is a lovely home," she said softly, then excused herself. When the door closed, I turned to him. "Ethan, this is our home. Your father and I bought this place when you were a baby." "I know, Mom," he sighed, "but it's old. It's falling apart. We could move somewhere nicer." I shook my head. "No, this house may be old, but it's filled with memories. Your first steps, your birthday parties, the night you cried when your dog passed. You can't put a price on that." He didn't respond. He just walked upstairs, muttering something under his breath. That night, I lay awake thinking about how fast everything had changed, how a mother's love, pure and patient, could be met with greed. But still, I forgave him. That's what mothers do. Days turned into weeks, and things went back to normal, or so I thought. Ethan was sweet again. He started helping me around the house, even cooked breakfast once or twice. He said he was saving for a surprise. I smiled, believing him. Maybe he was coming around. Maybe he realized that family meant more than money. Then came that night. It had rained heavily, and I'd gone to bed early. Ethan said he needed to sign some work papers before sleeping. I remember his voice calm, reassuring. "Good night, Mom," he said, kissing my forehead. I smiled and drifted off, never knowing that those would be the last peaceful words I'd hear in that home. Because while I slept, my son, the boy I raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, was in the living room, signing something else entirely. The deed to my house. I didn't know it then, but that one signature would change everything: my trust, my peace, my heart. And when I woke up the next morning to that empty house, to the sound of silence louder than any scream, I realized something inside me had broken forever. But here's the thing about a mother's heart: it may break, but it doesn't stay broken. Because when a mother loves deeply, she can also fight deeply. And that's when I decided, quietly, calmly, that Ethan was about to learn what happens when you betray the one person who gave you everything. He sold my house while I was sleeping. But he had no idea that he had just awakened something far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The morning after I found the deed, I sat on the floor of my empty living room, if you could still call it that. The sunlight crept through the curtains, landing on the small pile of things left behind: my old Bible, a few broken photo frames, and a cup of cold coffee I didn't remember pouring. I didn't cry. Not yet. My heart was too stunned to move. I just sat there, staring at the paper with Ethan's signature like it was a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Then the door opened. "Morning, Mom," Ethan said, his voice casual, too casual. He didn't even look guilty. He was dressed neatly, fresh shirt, polished shoes, and that scent he always wore when he was trying to impress someone. I turned my head slowly toward him. "Where are all our things, Ethan?" He avoided my eyes. "They came to pick them up early. The buyer's movers. I told them to start before you woke up." I blinked, confused. "The buyer?" He sighed, like he was the one who was tired of me. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll thank me later. We're getting a great deal out of this. The new owners paid way above market price." My heart sank deeper with every word. "Ethan, what did you do?" He rubbed his forehead, frustrated. "I did what's best for both of us. This old place was falling apart, Mom. You're always worried about bills, repairs, everything. Now you can relax. I already transferred a part of the money to your account." I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He thought this was helping me? "This house wasn't just walls and wood," I whispered. "It was our life, Ethan. Your father's memories, my sacrifices, your childhood." He looked at me, his eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. "It's just a house, Mom. You're being dramatic." That's when I felt something inside me shift quiet, slow, but dangerous. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something sharper, a calm kind of fury that sits still, waiting. I stood up, walked past him, and said softly, "You've made your choice, Ethan." He turned around, confused. "Mom," but I didn't answer. I just went to my room, or what was left of it, and sat on the bed, my mind racing. I wasn't the type to shout or curse. Life had taught me that silence could be louder than any word. Later that day, Ethan left to meet the buyer. He didn't even bother checking if I'd eaten. As soon as the front door shut, I took out an old wooden box from under my bed. Inside were photos, letters, and one small flash drive I'd almost forgotten about. It contained every financial record I'd kept since Ethan was a child, every tuition payment, every medical bill, every loan I'd taken in his name to keep him in school. And I remembered something else. When his father left, this house was placed in my name only. Ethan couldn't legally sell it without certain documents. I walked to the counter again and picked up the deed. My eyes narrowed. It was a real document, but something wasn't right. The signature at the bottom line looked strange, almost too perfect. A chill ran down my spine. He hadn't just sold my house. He had forged my signature, For a moment, the room spun. I gripped the table to steady myself, my breathing sharp and uneven. The son I loved had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Still, I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because revenge, the right kind of revenge, needs patience. I spent that night in my car parked outside the house, watching as strangers walked in and out carrying boxes. My house, my memories, my life. One of them, a tall man with gray hair, stopped and greeted me kindly. "Ma'am, you must be the former owner. Your son told us you'd already moved out. Beautiful place. We'll take good care of it." I forced a smile. "I'm sure you will," I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled. As they closed the door, I looked at the front porch light, the one I'd kept on every night since Ethan was a boy, so he'd never come home to darkness. And for the first time in 30 years, I turned it off. The next few days were a blur. I stayed in a small motel outside town, trying to think clearly. Each time I saw his name pop up on my phone, I couldn't bring myself to answer. What would I even say? Then one afternoon, there was a knock at the motel door. I opened it to find Ethan standing there, holding takeout bags, and wearing that same apologetic smile he used whenever he wanted to talk his way out of trouble. "Mom," he started softly, "I know you're upset, but please don't make this into a big deal. We can buy another place, a better one. I'm working with a guy who's helping me invest the rest of the money. We'll double it in no time." Something about that made me pause. "Invest the rest of the money?" I repeated. "With who?" He grinned. "This guy I met online, real estate investor, says he can flip houses fast. He already sent me a contract." I felt my stomach drop. "Ethan, no. You don't even know him." He frowned. "Mom, stop treating me like a kid. I know what I'm doing." That's when it hit me. He didn't just betray me. He was about to betray himself. Because the world doesn't go easy on the greedy. I looked at him, my son, so blinded by money that he couldn't see he was being used. And suddenly, a plan began to form. Not out of spite, not even for payback, but to teach him something he'd forgotten the value of truth. So I smiled for the first time since it happened. "All right, Ethan," I said calmly. "If you think this man can help us, then let's meet him." He blinked, surprised. "Really?" "Really," I said softly. "You trust him, so I'll trust you." But deep inside, I already knew this wasn't trust. This was strategy, because I was about to let Ethan dig his own grave. And when he did, I'd be right there, watching. Not out of cruelty, but to make sure he finally understood what happens when you destroy a good heart for greed. He sold the house while I was sleeping. But now, I was wide awake. Ethan was in high spirits the morning we drove to meet the investor. He kept tapping the steering wheel, humming to some upbeat tune on the radio. I sat beside him in silence, watching his profile as the sun hit his face, the same face I once kissed goodnight every single day of his childhood. He looked happy, confident, and utterly blind. "Mom, I'm telling you," he said, glancing at me with that bright grin. "This guy's a genius. He flips old houses, renovates them, and sells for triple the profit. We'll make so much, you won't have to work ever again." I smiled faintly. "And you trust him completely?" "Of course. He sent me all the paperwork. I even saw his profile online. He's got pictures with investors, fancy houses, cars, everything." I nodded slowly, trying not to show the ache in my chest. Cars, houses, fancy things. That's what mattered to him now. Not people, not home. We arrived at a tall glass building downtown. Inside, a man in his 50s greeted us with a practiced smile. "Ethan, good to see you, my boy." He turned to me. "And this must be your lovely mother." He introduced himself as Mr. Lewis. Polished shoes, gold watch, perfect smile. But his eyes were too sharp, too calculating. The kind of eyes that don't look at people only through them. He shook my hand gently, and something in me knew right then. This man wasn't who he claimed to be. "So," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "Ethan tells me you're both ready to invest in our next big project, prime property near the coast. We're only taking serious partners." Ethan leaned forward eagerly. "We're ready. I already wired the first payment." My head snapped toward him. "You did what?" He smiled nervously. "Don't worry, Mom. It's just the down payment. 50,000. We'll make it back 10 times over." Mr. Lewis chuckled, his tone smooth as silk. "Smart young man. Takes initiative. That's how you build an empire." I forced myself to stay calm. "May I see the full contract, Mr. Lewis?" "Of course," he said, handing it to me. But when I opened it, the text inside was vague, too vague. No company logo, no address, no legal stamp. Just words like investment, expected returns, and confidential partners. It was a scam, and a sophisticated one. But I said nothing. I simply smiled, signed my fake name on the witness line, and handed it back. Ethan looked proud. "See, Mom? I told you this was real." As we left the building, I turned once more to see Mr. Lewis watching us through the glass. His smile had faded, replaced by something colder. It confirmed what I already knew: Ethan had just been conned. But I didn't stop it. Not yet. Because sometimes life teaches through loss what love couldn't teach through comfort. That night, Ethan was giddy. He ordered dinner from his favorite restaurant, talking about the future. He showed me sketches of beach houses, talked about buying me a car, and even promised to take me on a cruise once the profits came in. I smiled and nodded through it all, pretending to share his excitement. But inside, I was planning. See, when a mother truly loves her child, she'll do anything, even let him fall, if it means he'll finally learn to stand again. 3 days later, Ethan woke me up in a panic. His voice was trembling. "Mom, something's wrong. The number he gave me, it's disconnected. The office is gone. I went there this morning, it's empty." I sat up slowly. "Empty?" He nodded, breathing fast. "And the website, it's gone too. Mom, I think we've been scammed." I stayed quiet, watching him pace the room, his phone clutched tight in his shaking hands. For the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes, not the selfish kind, but the kind that humbles you, the kind that reminds you that no amount of money can buy wisdom. When he finally sat down, I spoke gently. "Ethan, when you sold this house, you said it was just a house. That money would make life easier." He looked at me, his voice cracking. "I know. I messed up, Mom. I thought I was doing the right thing." "No," I said quietly. "You thought you were doing the smart thing. There's a difference." He buried his face in his hands, whispering, "What am I going to do?" That was everything we had. For a long moment, I just watched him, my son proud, stubborn, broken. And as much as part of me wanted to say "I told you so," another part of me, the mother in me, still wanted to protect him. But I couldn't let him off easy. Not yet. "Ethan," I said finally, "you might have lost our money, but you haven't lost everything. Not yet." He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "I mean, there are things I kept, things you don't know about." He frowned. "What things?" I stood up and walked to my purse, pulling out the small flash drive, the same one that held years of records, proof of forgery, and all the documents that tied back to my name. I held it between my fingers and said softly, "Let's just say I've been keeping track of everything you've done and everything you shouldn't have." He blinked, his confusion growing. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I slipped the flash drive into my pocket. "Nothing you need to worry about right now. First, we'll find out exactly who took your money." But inside, my thoughts were clear. Ethan wasn't just going to face the scammer. he was going to face himself. And this time, I wasn't stepping in to save him. Because some lessons in life aren't meant to be prevented. They're meant to be felt. The next morning, Ethan went to the police to report the fraud. I didn't go with him. Instead, I drove to the city records office to confirm something that had been haunting me since I first saw that forged deed. When the clerk handed me the file, my heart stopped. There it was, my fake signature, stamped and approved. The document had been pushed through by someone inside the system, someone who had helped Ethan make the sale. That meant this wasn't just Ethan's doing anymore. He'd had help. And now, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about justice. I folded the paper neatly, looked up at the clerk, and said calmly, "Could you give me the name of the person who processed this file?" She hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm not supposed to." I leaned forward and smiled faintly. "I'm sure you'll make an exception. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman with nothing left to lose." And that's when it began, the first move of my real revenge. Ethan thought he'd sold my house, but he had no idea that I was about to take back far more than he ever stole. The woman at the city records office hesitated, glancing around as if someone might be watching. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the fear of breaking the rules versus the quiet sympathy she felt for a mother who had clearly lost everything. After a long pause, she leaned closer and whispered, "The transaction was processed by a man named Brian Collins. He works in the real estate verification department. But be careful. He's well connected." I gave her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," I said softly. As I stepped outside, the city air felt different, colder, heavier. I stood there for a moment, watching the people rush by, all busy with their own lives, while mine had been torn apart by the one person I trusted most. But I wasn't helpless anymore, not this time. That afternoon, I sat in my car across from the records building, waiting. Around 5 o'clock, I saw him, a tall man in his 40s, with slicked back hair and an expensive-looking watch. He walked out with confidence, briefcase in hand, and headed toward a silver Lexus. I followed him. He stopped by a cafe downtown, sat by the window, and ordered coffee. From the way he kept checking his phone, I could tell he was waiting for someone, and I didn't have to wait long to see who that was. Ethan. My chest tightened. I watched my son walk in and sit across from Brian like they were old friends. They shook hands, exchanged smiles, and began talking quietly but urgently. I turned off my car engine and just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The truth hit me harder than I expected. Ethan hadn't been tricked by a stranger. He had known this man all along. That scam wasn't a coincidence. It was planned. I watched Brian hand Ethan a brown envelope. Ethan opened it, nodded, and then passed him another smaller one, probably filled with cash. My heart sank. My son had lied again. He hadn't lost everything. He'd been hiding something from me. When they finally left, I followed Ethan home. He didn't even notice. He parked his car, rushed inside, and disappeared into his room. Through the window, I saw him open the brown envelope and start counting money. I felt my throat tighten as tears filled my eyes. He had betrayed me once, and now, even after everything, he was still doing it. But this time, I wasn't going to break down. This time, I was going to act. That night, I sat quietly in the motel, staring at the old flash drive in my hand. It contained everything I needed: his forged documents, payment records, and now, with what I'd seen, I could tie him directly to Brian. But revenge isn't about speed. It's about precision. So, I began my plan. The next morning, I went to the police station not to file a case yet, but to make inquiries. I introduced myself as a property owner investigating a fraudulent sale. The officer, a young woman named Detective Harris, listened carefully as I told her about the sale and the forged signature. She asked, "Do you have proof that your signature was forged?" I nodded. Yes, but I need to confirm something first. The person who processed the sale, Brian Collins, might be working with multiple clients to push fake deals. If I can prove it, will that help? She leaned forward. Absolutely. If you can link him to a pattern of fraud, we can open an investigation. I smiled faintly. Then I'll bring you what you need. As I left the station, the plan was clear. I wasn't going to expose Ethan yet. No, he needed to see, firsthand, what betrayal felt like. So, I decided to go through Brian. For days, I watched him from his office, to his home, to the cafe, where he met clients. He was arrogant, predictable, and greedy. And one evening, I got what I needed. He met another client in that same cafe, a middle-aged woman, nervous and clutching property documents. From the corner of the cafe, I recorded everything on my phone. Brian was offering her a fast-track sale for a huge fee, the exact scam he'd used with my son. I smiled to myself. Gotcha. Later that night, I sent an anonymous email to Detective Harris with the video attached and a message. This man is selling fake property deals. He's connected to multiple illegal transfers. Check the name Brian Collins. 2 days later, I saw it on the local news. City official arrested for real estate fraud. Brian Collins. I watched from the motel TV, sipping my tea. It was satisfying, yes, but bittersweet. Because while justice was being served, the person I loved most was still lost in the middle of it. That night, Ethan came to my motel room. His face was pale. Mom, did you see the news? I nodded slowly. About Brian? He ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, they arrested him. The police said he'd been faking documents, stealing from clients. But they might look into me. Why? I asked, feigning surprise. Because my name's on some of his files. I swear, I didn't know he was doing anything illegal, Mom. He told me everything was above board. I stayed silent, letting him sweat. Mom, he said, his voice trembling, if they find out I was part of the sale, I could go to jail. I turned to him slowly. Ethan, when you sold our house, did you ever stop to think how I felt? That was my life, my memories, and you erased them like they were nothing. His eyes filled with tears. I know. I messed up, Mom. I'm sorry. Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at him, the boy I once carried in my arms, now sitting before me as a man who had no idea how far he'd fallen. Ethan, I said softly, there's a difference between being sorry and being ready to change. Which one are you? He didn't answer. I sighed and looked away. You should go home. You'll need to deal with the consequences of your choices. As he left, I noticed he forgot something on the table, the same brown envelope from before. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside were bank transfer receipts. Not from Brian, but from another name. A name I hadn't seen before. Lydia Parker. The name felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then it hit me. Lydia was Ethan's old girlfriend, the one he dated right after college. She'd left him because she said he was too focused on money. And now, it seemed she was back in his life. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. So it wasn't just about me anymore. There was someone else tangled in this web. Someone who either helped him or was using him. Either way, the game wasn't over. I closed the envelope, placed it neatly beside me, and whispered to myself, "All right, Lydia Parker, let's see what role you play in my son's downfall." Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for redemption mine, and maybe even Ethan's. But before that could happen, the next storm was already forming. And when it hit, it would destroy everything left between us. The name Lydia Parker echoed in my mind for days. I couldn't shake it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that pretty blonde girl who used to come to our house, polite and sweet, calling me Miss Laura with a smile. Back then, I'd thought she was good for Ethan. She grounded him. She cared. Until one day, she was gone. Ethan said she wasn't ambitious enough, that she didn't understand his goals. But now, years later, her name was sitting in an envelope tied to dirty money and a broken house. I had to find out what she was doing in all this. The next morning, I called in a favor from an old friend, Karen, a retired private investigator. Karen owed me a few favors from when I helped her sister through nursing school. I just need information, I told her over coffee. Where she lives, what she's been doing lately, and if she's connected to anyone in real estate. Karen raised an eyebrow. You're not planning to do something crazy, are you? I gave her a small smile. Not crazy, just necessary. By evening, Karen had what I needed. Lydia was living 2 towns away, working as a property consultant recently linked to Brian Collins's firm. My breath caught. It all connected now. Ethan didn't just sell the house for money. Lydia and Brian had convinced him it was an investment partnership. He thought he was building his future, but they were using him to move illegal property transfers through his name. They used my son's greed and my signature to get rich. And now Brian was in jail, which meant Lydia was the only one left. That night, I called Ethan. Ethan, I need to see you, I said softly. It's important. He arrived at the motel an hour later, his face pale, his hands trembling. Mom, they're investigating everyone who worked with Brian. I got a call from the police today. They want to question me. Good, I said calmly. It's time you start telling the truth. He stared at me, confused. What do you mean? I stood up and handed him the brown envelope he'd left behind. These transfers weren't random, Ethan. You've been sending money to Lydia Parker. His eyes widened. How do you... I found the receipts, I interrupted. Why didn't you tell me? He looked away, guilt written all over his face. Because I thought she was helping me, Mom. Lydia said she had connections in real estate. She introduced me to Brian. She said it was a safe deal. And you believed her? I asked, my tone sharper now. She promised she could help me make enough to buy the house back for you, he said quietly. That's why I trusted her. I thought I could fix everything I ruined. For a brief second, my anger wavered. Beneath his arrogance, there was still the boy I'd raised lost, desperate, trying to make things right in the only way he knew. But the truth was bigger than his intentions now. Ethan, I said, sitting beside him, Lydia wasn't helping you. She was helping herself. She and Brian worked together. She used you to move money under your name. And now that he's arrested, she's going to disappear with everything you gave her. He stared at me, shocked. No, she wouldn't. She already did, I said coldly. I checked her address. She's gone. He sank into the chair, his face drained of color. Oh my God! For a long moment, we sat in silence. Then I said quietly, You wanted to fix this, Ethan. Here's your chance. He looked up, confused. What do you mean? I want you to help me find her. He hesitated. Mom, how? She's probably long gone. I smiled faintly. Trust me, I've spent half my life finding lost things, bills, jobs, hope. A person isn't much harder. That night, we drove together for the first time in years, not as mother and son, but as 2 people chasing the same ghost. We followed Karen's trail to a small coastal town 3 hours away. Lydia had checked into a luxury seaside villa 2 nights earlier. We parked nearby and waited in the shadows. Around midnight, she appeared wearing a long white coat, a suitcase in hand, and that same confident smile she always had. She was heading toward a car parked by the water. I could see the reflection of her phone screen as she made a call. Yes, the transfer went through, she said. Brian's gone, and the boy's too scared to talk. I'll be in Mexico by tomorrow. My blood ran cold. Without thinking, I stepped out of the car and called out, "Lydia!" She froze, turning around. For a moment, she didn't recognize me. Then her eyes widened. "Mrs. Green?" I walked toward her slowly, my voice calm but sharp. "You really thought you could take everything from me and my son and just disappear?" She laughed nervously. "You don't understand. This wasn't personal." Ethan agreed to everything. "Agreed?" I cut in. "You lied to him. You used him." Ethan stepped out of the shadows then, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Lydia, you said you were helping me." Her expression changed soft, almost pitying. "Ethan, I told you from the start, business is business. You wanted fast money. I just showed you how to get it." Ethan looked like someone had punched the air out of him. He stepped closer. "You played me." She sighed. "You played yourself. I just knew which game you were playing. That was it. I'd heard enough." "Where's the money?" I demanded. Lydia smirked. "You think I'd tell you that?" She turned toward her car, but I stepped in front of her. My voice lowered to a whisper. "You forged my name, you sold my home, and you dragged my son into your schemes. You have no idea what you've started." Her smirk faded. "Are you threatening me?" I smiled slightly. "No, I'm promising you." She tried to push past me, but Ethan grabbed her wrist. "You're not leaving," he said, his voice trembling but firm. I nodded toward the parking lot where Karen's friend, an off-duty officer, had been waiting. Within minutes, Lydia was in handcuffs. The look on her face as she was led away was almost satisfying. Almost. Because even though she'd hurt us, the deeper wound still came from the boy standing beside me. As the police car drove away, Ethan sank to his knees, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was stupid. I thought I could fix everything, and I just kept making it worse." I knelt beside him, placing my hand on his shoulder. "You can't undo the past, Ethan. But you can learn from it. And if you're lucky, you can rebuild." He looked at me, eyes red and broken. "Do you think you can ever forgive me?" I paused. "I already did, long before you asked. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." He nodded slowly. The next few weeks were quiet. The police investigation cleared Ethan after he cooperated fully and returned what little was left of the money. The house, of course, was gone for goods sold legally, even if the signature was forged. But sometimes, life gives you new beginnings where endings were supposed to be. With a small settlement from the case, I bought a modest home by the edge of town. Not as big, not as grand, but peaceful. And one morning, as I sat on the porch with my coffee, Ethan walked up carrying flowers. He didn't say much, just smiled, placed them beside me, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I looked at him, my heart swelling with both pride and sadness. "I gave you everything, Ethan, but maybe losing it all was what you needed to finally see what truly matters." He nodded quietly. And as I watched him sit beside me, my son, humbled, changed, still learning, I knew that revenge had never been my true goal. It was redemption. He sold my house while I was sleeping. But in the end, I woke up to something far greater, the truth. And sometimes, that's the sweetest revenge of all.